I'm Bill Wilt of Assured Research. Thanks for joining this quick hit video where we focus on one research note drawn from our June 2025 Assured briefing. In this case, we're looking at the economy and property casualty insurance and asking the question of how insurers perform during years of economic expansion or years of contraction, that is, years touched by a recession. Many will know we've been using for some time the mantra or expression that insurers are property casualty insurers are recession resilient but not recession proof, and I think the data bears that out. So I'll share my screen, and while I do that, I'll just thank you for joining and tell you that anybody who's interested in this content or more at our YouTube site should feel free to reach out, and we will happily share the screen. That's what I want to do. Put you on a trial to our research. So with that, let me share the screen, and there we go. So you should be seeing it now. Data back to 1952. We looked at the economy, both in total and all the industries, 16 or more specific industries, GDP by industry, and examined the relationship between premium growth and again, years of economic expansion or years touched by a recession. And the data really bears out that observation that insurers are recession resilient, although not recession proof. In years of an expansion or contraction, there's modest difference in the written premium growth, modest difference in the combined ratio, a little bit worse in both cases in years of a recession, but it's really not statistically significant. And it bears out what you see in the stock market, which is that property casualty insurers are viewed as defensive stocks. They typically don't perform as well as plenty of other industry sectors in years when the economy is booming and the stock market is rising. But in here, the important defensive attribute is they don't then in years of recession perform as poorly as other industries, might even in some cases rise because of these defensive attributes. So that's good news for property casualty insurers. But we wanted to take it a step further. And this is pretty well known and largely consensus thinking. In this work, we wanted to take it a step further and ask the question, or at least challenge ourselves to add some nuance to the expression. As goes GDP growth, so goes P&C written premium growth, and ask the question of, are there any particular industries that are really meaningfully correlated with the property casualty insurance premium industry? And the answer is yes. Retail, trade, and construction. Now, again, this is looking at industry GDP growth back to the early 1950s, so a very long stretch, examining the relationship between industry written premium growth and specific industries. I'll share that since they're all the industries and premium growth tend to be highly correlated with time, we used a statistical technique to remove that trend, remove just the temporal trend with time, and looked at the residuals. So there's at least a little bit of statistical sophistication here. I don't want to overplay that, but acknowledging that plenty of industries show a broad correlation, we've kind of removed that and are looking at just the residuals and can observe that it's really construction and retail trade. So in 2025, recession, no recession, we're going to be watching these two industries in particular because I think they'll give good insights into what could happen with insurers, at least written premium growth, perhaps not their necessarily the combined ratio. What I wanted to point out here too, you take a step back, you can see the broad correlation. It's the retail, trade, construction, overall GDP, and then industry written premium growth. So you see the broad correlations overall. But the arrows show, if you look in the mid 70s, the mid 80s, and then the mid 90s, that in previous times of economic expansion or contraction, the industry, the P&C industry, had a particularly high beta. That is, that it tended to grow more or grow noticeably less than all three of the other series. But move forward in time, would look at the great financial crisis in the 2008, 9, 10 time frame, and then the expansion, or at least moderate expansion, in the mid-teens, and it was actually construction that showed the higher beta relative to the industry. So that's kind of interesting, an interesting observation. But the point is, watch retail trade, watch construction. Construction is the largest purchaser of P&C premiums at, I think, $61 billion, about 13% of the total. Retail trade, 64 billion. Retail trade is 31 billion of commercial insurance premiums, maybe 6% of the total. 6% of the total. And I'll just point out that in our research note, we use data from Verisk's Market Stance business unit to show the actual specific products that are purchased. So with that, I'll conclude it and say, remind you, just watch retail trade, watch construction, and I think they'll provide insights into how the P&C industry is going to do in 2025 or into 2026. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.